Today's story is one of high society drama, colonial power plays, and justice left hanging in the balance, the chilling murder of Sir Harry Oakes. But before we explore this tale of wealth, betrayal, and unanswered questions, make sure to subscribe to Caribbean Files for more in-depth true crime from across the region. If you enjoy our investigations, please like this video and leave a comment. Your support helps us uncover and share the Caribbean's most compelling mysteries. Let's begin. By 1943, Sir Harry Oakes had become an almost mythical figure. He was the largest landowner in the Bahamas, a man worth $200 million, but his story began humbly. Born in Sangerville, Maine in 1874, young Harry Oakes was precocious and ambitious. After 2 years of medical school, he quit in 1898 to chase gold. As a college student, he famously declared, "I plan to make $1 million." And chasing that dream, he spent the next 15 years prospecting from Canada to Alaska, Australasia, and beyond. He studied geology and refined his instincts for high-grade ores. In 1912, Oakes struck it rich in northern Ontario's Kirkland Lake. Working with meager funds and even selling off future shares of his mine, he discovered what would become the Lakeshore Mine. This vein soon turned into the second largest gold mine in North America. By 1921, Oakes was a multimillionaire. He built a grand estate, Oak Hall, in Niagara Falls, and married Eunice McIntyre, an Australian woman 22 years his junior. Yet even as his wealth grew, he chafed at taxes. In the early 1930s, Canada's Conservative government proposed tax rates that would have claimed 85% of his immense fortune. In 1 year, he paid about $3 million in Canadian taxes. In 1939, King George VI granted him a baronetcy for his achievements. By 1934 to 35, Sir Harry and Lady Oakes had had enough. They moved their growing family of 5 children to Nassau in search of sun and a lighter tax burden. The Bahamas then was a British crown colony of about 70,000 people, roughly 75% of African descent. Its white elite, nicknamed the Bay Street Boys, ran everything. Oakes promptly invested in the colony. He bought vast swaths of land on New Providence, built homes and even a golf course and private airport to transform the place to his liking. He made Nassau his home, bringing Eunice and their children to settle in the capital. Life in wartime, Nassau was far from tranquil. The island buzzed with military activity. British and American forces were expanding airfields, but social tensions simmered. The economy still bore the legacy of the Prohibition-era rum trade, now ended, and the standard of living was low for most Bahamians. In June 1942, thousands of Black Bahamian construction workers marched on Bay Street to demand fair wages on a U.S.-built airbase project. Their protest turned violent when authorities refused concessions. For 2 days, Nassau was in uproar. 5 Black workers were killed, and over 100 jailed during what became known as the Burma Road Riot. Colonial officials even spread rumors that this labor unrest was fomented by Nazi agents. In short, Nassau was a powder keg of race and class conflict. Politically, the colony had little popular power. The British governor held executive control, aided by a small advisory council and a local assembly, but the franchise was extremely limited. In practice, Nassau's legislature was dominated by Bay Street's all-white elites. These men blocked any measure that threatened their business interests, including reforms backed by the British Colonial Office, such as secret ballots and modest labor programs. Into this charged environment came Edward VIII, now styled the Duke of Windsor, as governor in August 1940. Britain had sent the ex-king, who had abdicated in 1936, to Nassau as a sort of wartime exile. He and his American wife, Wallis Simpson, arrived amid much fanfare and some suspicion of their loyalties. But Nassau's political battles were already brewing. The Duke was exactly the kind of high-born outsider both Nassau's government and its public saw as a puzzle. On one hand, he frustrated reformers by siding with Bay Street's power base. On the other hand, he personally intervened to raise wartime wages after the 1942 riots, which earned reluctant praise from Black labor leaders. Socially, the Duke and Duchess preferred to live largely among Nassau's white circles. The Duchess threw herself into charity work and war efforts, but the couple famously groused about their exile to this hot little hell. The Duke used Bahamian funds to extensively remodel Government House and could be autocratic. He even replaced the local police chief with a Miami detective after arriving and pressed for outside investigators once the Oaks murder occurred. In short, the Duke was an outsized figure in Nassau's wartime story. He and Oaks proved to be an unlikely pair, he as an exiled monarch, Oaks as a self-made magnate with deep pockets. Rumors would later swirl about shady dealings between them, and the governor's role became central once the murder occurred. Allies and rivals orbited around Sir Harry in Nassau. Foremost among his Bahamian friends was Harold Christie, a charismatic real estate tycoon. Christie had long courted Oaks's friendship and even persuaded him to make Nassau his residence. The two men founded businesses together, including an early airline, and often shared dinner and golf. On the night Sir Harry died, Christie discovered the body the next morning after staying overnight to review Oaks's accounts. Notably, Christie was never formally accused. Nassau society rallied around him. However, modern investigators have speculated that financial strains may have created tension. By summer 1943, Oaks was considering emigration, fearing that Bahamian taxes and politics threatened his fortune. Some historians argue that if Oaks had left, it would have been ruinous for Christie's own enterprises. Meanwhile, Count Alfred de Marigny, a French Mauritian playboy, proved a flashpoint. He had eloped with Oaks's eldest daughter Nancy on her 18th birthday in 1942, provoking family scandal. Unlike the steady Christie, de Marigny was volatile and deeply in debt. By mid-1943, Oaks had forbidden him from Westbourne and even rewritten his will to exclude him. On the eve of the murder, de Marigny was abroad on business and Nancy was away at college. Investigators later noted that Oaks and his son-in-law had not spoken for months, and de Marigny's resentments over inheritance were palpable. Sir Harry's other children were abroad when the killing occurred, leaving him effectively isolated except for Christie and a small household staff. In this way, Oaks's inner circle was both tight and strained, an ideal crucible for betrayal. Modern historians emphasize that Sir Harry was more complex than tabloids portrayed. He could be ruthless and arrogant, once buying a hotel to fire its maître d'hôtel for a perceived slight, yet he also donated generously to charitable causes and wartime relief. His actions benefited the local economy, he paid extra wages, improved infrastructure, and funded community projects. Yet his flamboyant displays of wealth and disdain for social norms earned him enemies among Nassau's elite. In the American press, Oaks was known as the richest man in the British Empire, with a net worth estimated at $200 million, roughly $3 to $4 billion today. By 1943, that fortune sat on a small island under clouds of suspicion. Oaks fretted over taxes, power outages, and his standing among the Bay Street establishment. Rumors persisted that he planned to ship bullion to Mexico or elsewhere for safety, an uncertainty that some historians believe provided motive for those fearing financial ruin if he left. On the clear, starlit night of July 7, 1943, Nassau lay hushed under a canopy of tropical warmth. Inside Westbourne, the spacious colonial residence of Sir Harry Oaks, he and his longtime friend and business partner Harold Christie concluded a private dinner at around 11:30 p.m. Their meal, freshly caught fish, seasonal greens, and crisp island wine, was followed by a discussion of Oakes's plans to expand his aviation strip on New Providence and his concerns over wartime labor disputes. At midnight, Christie elected to remain in the drawing room to review financial ledgers. Oakes excused himself and retired to his upstairs bedroom, where a ceiling fan stirred the heavy air. At approximately 6 a.m. on July 8th, Harold Christie, arising to fetch morning coffee, noticed faint smoke drifting from beneath the bedroom door. Rushing inside, he found the bedding smoldering and Sir Harry's body half propped on pillows, garments singed and stained with dark congealed blood. Christie's immediate reaction, shouting for help and grabbing a pitcher of water, alerted the small household staff. By 6:20 a.m., uniformed constables of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, summoned by Christie's urgent call, had sealed Westbourne's grounds and begun securing the scene. Detective Superintendent Marissa Ogle arrived soon after, accompanied by Acting Commissioner Stephen Williams. Under Ogle's direction, crime scene officers documented every detail with methodical precision. Dr. Lawrence Fitzmaurice, Nassau's senior pathologist, recorded multiple fractures at the base of the skull. He described the wounds as heavy impact depressions, irregular in shape, indicating the use of a substantial, blunt instrument. The force of these blows would have rendered Oakes unconscious immediately and precipitated rapid, fatal hemorrhaging. Investigators confirmed that gasoline had been poured over the upper torso and bedding, then ignited. The mattress foam and pillow cotton were collected for later chemical testing, which would verify hydrocarbon residues consistent with petroleum distillates. A ground floor window in the servants' wing, normally secured each night, was found unlatched and its mosquito screen torn. No other doors showed signs of forced entry, suggesting the assailant favored that window for covert access. While sophisticated spatter pattern analysis was not yet standard practice, officers noted droplets on the wall behind the bed and smears on the floorboards outside the bedroom, indicating movement of the injured body. Dr. Fitzmaurice estimated the time of death between 12:30 a.m. and 2 a.m. based on body temperature, rigor mortis, and early stages of tissue decomposition. He emphasized that the subsequent fire complicated precise timing, but reinforced that the burning was a deliberate attempt to obscure forensic evidence. Within hours, news of the brutal execution reached Governor Edward, Duke of Windsor. Concerned both by the prominence of the victim and by whispers of local interference, the Duke invoked his wartime authority to request assistance from the Miami Police Department. On July 10th, two experienced Miami detectives, Captain William Melrose and Detective James Barker, arrived in Nassau, armed with advanced fingerprint lifting powders, forensic photography equipment, and orders to collaborate with local authorities. The joint command structure was formalized in a memorandum. The Royal Bahamas Police would maintain jurisdiction, while the Miami detectives would advise on forensic technique. This arrangement, though lawful under colonial mandates, sparked unease among Bahamian officers who feared their own investigative expertise might be overshadowed. Under Captain Melrose's oversight, crime scene technicians performed additional evidence collection. Melrose introduced a fine powder method, successfully recovering a partial print from Sir Harry's Buick sedan, parked on the veranda drive. That print, when compared against Nassau's registry, yielded no match, suggesting either an outsider's involvement or a person never fingerprinted locally. Swabs from the mattress and floorboards were sent to a Miami laboratory for gas chromatography analysis. Results returned weeks later confirmed the presence of gasoline residues. Loose papers from an overturned nightstand drawer, among them personal correspondence, were carefully bagged and cataloged, establishing an evidentiary trail guarded by both TTPS and Miami detectives. Despite these measures, tensions emerged. Local detectives noted that certain items, specifically mattress foam samples, were removed for Miami testing before Bahamian documentation was complete. Acting Commissioner Williams's later reports would cite breaks in chain of custody, though no formal challenge was raised at the time. Alongside forensic efforts, investigators canvassed the neighborhood. In his statement, Christie recounted seeing no intruder upon his retirement to the drawing room at midnight. He noted the bedroom fans whirring as the only sound until the smoke alarm. His testimony established Oakes's last known movements and affirmed the absence of evening visitors. Anthony Lewis, taxi driver. Operating near Westbourne, Lewis told detectives that at about 12:45 a.m., he had observed a dark silhouette dart across Picton Street toward the estate wall. He described the figure as slim, wearing a dark coat and light trousers, carrying what appeared to be a long object. Although he did not see the individual's face, Lewis's account provided a narrow time frame for the assailant's entry. House logs showed that, unusually, the overnight staff roster had been reduced that night. 2 servants called off, citing illness. While no direct evidence implicated staffing decisions, Ogle's team flagged the anomaly as potentially indicative of planned absence. No other credible eyewitnesses came forward. Christie's initial phone call was the sole contemporary recorded alert. All other household members claimed not to have been present near the bedroom wing during the critical hours. By July 12th, investigators had compiled a robust dossier: autopsy findings, gasoline residue confirmation, a partial fingerprint, and the unlatched servant's window. Yet they faced persistent obstacles. Firstly, Nassau's laboratory lacked in-house accelerant testing. Reliance on distant Miami labs introduced procedural delays. Next, the transfer of critical samples for U.S. analysis sparked defense concerns over evidence integrity. Also, the reduced night shift roster at Westbourne raised questions of inside knowledge, but yielded no direct proof of complicity. And finally, dual oversight occasionally resulted in duplicated logs and conflicting directives, slowing the pace of interviews. Despite these hurdles, the investigation's early phase laid bare the crime's premeditation, execution precision, and deliberate evidence concealment. The absence of forced entry beyond the servant wing window and the specialized nature of the skull fractures pointed to a perpetrator both familiar with the estate and equipped with a heavy, blunt instrument, details that would later help shape suspect profiles. In the days following Sir Harry Oakes's murder, suspicion swiftly focused on his estranged son-in-law, Count Alfred de Marigny. De Marigny had not set foot in Westbourne for over 2 years, yet on July 9th, just 36 hours after Oakes's body was discovered, Miami detective James Barker announced a positive identification of de Marigny's fingerprint on a Chinese lacquered screen in the bedroom. That declaration reverberated through Nassau. The Playboy Count was arrested and charged with his father-in-law's murder. On July 9th, de Marigny was apprehended at his rented villa on Eastern Road. Captains Melrose and Barker, working under Governor Windsor's directive, led the arrest. As de Marigny was driven to the Nassau jail, a crowd gathered, angry whispers accusing him of parricide. The Duke of Windsor, fearing a prison lynching, ordered the Nassau Fire Brigade to stand guard outside the lockup. De Marigny's wife, Nancy, a former debutante turned Dartmouth-trained artist, rushed back from Florida to organize his defense. At the core of the prosecution's case lay the fingerprint purportedly lifted from the screen. Barker testified that during a re-examination on July 9th, he dusted the screen and found a latent print matching de Marigny's known fingerprint record. With confidence, he claimed the ridge patterns were identical in core, delta, and minutiae, asserting near certainty. Under cross-examination by de Marigny's defense counsel, Godfrey W. Higgs, Barker's methodology unraveled. It emerged that he had employed a rubber lift, not standard sticky tape, which destroyed the original print. Worse, Professor Harrison Keeler, an independent fingerprint expert Nancy's team had brought in, testified the print could not have come from the lacquered screen surface at Westbourne. Keeler demonstrated that de Marigny's print bore contaminants suggesting it originated on a glass tumbler, not an oily wood screen. Further, Higgins exposed the logistical implausibility. When Barker first examined the screen, he had no latent print camera to photograph the fresh powder print. Instead, he later recreated the print from cellophane he admitted having given de Marigny at the police station, a sequence Higgins characterized as genuinely extraordinary. The trial commenced in late July 1943 before Chief Justice Ralph Rivers. Prosecution opening statements leapt on the fingerprint as irrefutable proof. Crown Attorney Samuel Hoyt declared, "The murderer's own cell mark condemns him." But the defense hit back. Several guests from the dinner, though small in number, testified that de Marigny had remained at Christie's side until nearly midnight. Christie, under oath, confirmed de Marigny had been in the drawing room at 11:30 p.m. when Oakes retired. In a dramatic moment, Nancy de Marigny, feverish yet resolute, took the stand as the final defense witness. She recounted her husband's absence from Westbourne by personal decree of Oakes and described their mutual estrangement. Overcome by emotion, she paused mid-testimony, then declared, "He could no more kill his own father-in-law than I could mine." Her impassioned plea reportedly swayed the jury. As the defense dissected the prosecution's case, additional irregularities surfaced. Evan Schindler, the private investigator Nancy had retained, discovered that Bahamian officers had scrubbed portions of Oakes's bedroom wall free of potential handprints, allegedly on orders no one claimed to remember. Photographic plates taken by Barker of a bloody handprint near the bed were later ruined by light exposure. These actions fed rumors that high-level figures, including the Duke himself, had sought to conceal alternative prints. Governor Windsor, though initially instrumental in importing the Miami detectives, was conspicuously absent from Nassau during the trial. He had departed on the pretext of a Caribbean inspection tour, but avoided subpoena as a witness, raising questions about his potential knowledge of Oakes's finances and personal dealings. After 4 weeks of testimony, the jury retired. Rumors circulated that they had sequestered at the historic Colonial Club Hotel. Just 2 hours later, on August 14, 1943, the foreman delivered the unanimous verdict, not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Nancy wept openly. Supporters cheered. De Marigny embraced his wife before being led to freedom. Chief Justice Rivers later praised the integrity of the Bahamian jury system, though he cautioned that evidence errors should not discourage diligent investigators. Despite acquittal, de Marigny did not remain long in the Bahamas. Within weeks, a civil deportation order, ostensibly for immigration technicalities, was executed. He and Nancy departed for Havana, where Ernest Hemingway briefly sheltered them. No other suspect was ever formally charged. In the wake of the trial, unanswered questions festered. Speculation tied Oakes's refusal to grant American mobsters casino rights, figures like Meyer Lansky, to his murder. No hard evidence emerged, but the theory endured in popular accounts. Some historians suggest Christie, who owed Oakes significant sums, had the most obvious financial motive. A rumor that Christie was seen in Nassau town the night of the murder, despite his testimony, remains unverified. Accusations that the Duke orchestrated evidence suppression to hide financial improprieties circulated in Bahamian political gossip and later memoirs of colonial officials. Alfred de Marigny's acquittal closed the judicial chapter, but left the case officially unsolved. In the decades since, researchers have combed through police files and personal archives to reconstruct events. Yet the true killer's identity remains a mystery. By the time Alfred de Marigny walked free from the courtroom in August 1943, the formal legal chapter of Sir Harry Oakes's murder had closed, but the story was far from over. No one else was ever charged, the fingerprint evidence discredited, and the murderer's identity remained cloaked in speculation. In the decades following the trial, successive generations of Bahamian police officers and historians revisited the files. Internal correspondence from the 1950s confirmed that some senior officers remained unconvinced of de Marigny's innocence. One memo from 1958 noted that private interviews with former Westbourne staff continued to hint at an unidentified third party. Yet without new evidence, the force formally closed the case in 1962. American criminologist Marshall Houts published Who Killed Sir Harry Oakes? Drawing on Miami PD notes and Houts argued the fingerprint fiasco had diverted attention from more credible suspects, most notably Harold Christie, whose financial entanglements with Oakes remained under-examined. Houts never named Christie outright, but implied that a beneficiary with motive and means had evaded scrutiny. In 1998, the newly formed TTPS Cold Case Unit secured permission to retest surviving physical evidence. Unfortunately, the only surviving item, a scrap of Oakes's blood-spattered bedding, proved too degraded for modern DNA analysis. A decade later, an archivist's discovery of Christie's personal letters in a Nassau museum collection revealed that Oakes had indeed threatened to cut Christie from his will just weeks before his death. Though suggestive, these letters arrived too late for prosecution. Over 80 years, certain theories have endured. The Harold Christie financial motive. Christie had advanced large sums to Oakes's ventures and stood to lose if Oakes liquidated his Bahamian holdings. Christie discovered the body, and his late arrival at dawn gave him control over first response details. However, Christie's alibi, dinner into midnight, was supported by household logs and his own testimony. No physical evidence linked him to the murder weapon or scene beyond circumstantial motive. Rumors tied Meyer Lansky's syndicate to Nassau's burgeoning gambling potential. Oakes had declined to license casino operations on his property, allegedly angering mob figures. However, no documented contact exists between Oakes and known mobsters. U.S. Treasury and FBI records from the era show no investigation into Bahamian organized crime links. The Duke of Windsor's importation of Miami detectives and his swift departure mid-trial fueled rumors he suppressed evidence to protect political or financial interests. Anecdotal memoirs allege the Duke pressured police to keep Bay Street stable. However, no archival directive unambiguously orders evidence tampering. Windsor's memoirs insist he sought impartial justice, though his partial withdrawal during trial remains unexplained. Oakes and de Marigny clashed bitterly over inheritance. De Marigny's debts and alienation provided strong motive, but de Marigny's acquittal rested on alibi, flawed fingerprint evidence, and lack of any witness placing him at Westbourne after midnight. The Oakes case left lasting marks. Royal Bahamas police force overhauled its forensic protocols in the 1950s, mandating secure chain of custody procedures and in-house accelerant testing. Modern Bahamian police credit Oakes's murder as the impetus for creating their Forensic Science Center in 1968. Chief Justice Rivers's scathing rebuke of fingerprint misuse became a touchstone in Commonwealth law, cited in subsequent Caribbean cases on evidentiary standards. The case exposed the power of Bay Street elites and wartime governors, emboldening post-war reformers. In 1953, universal suffrage and secret ballots slowly curtailed oligarchic control, reforms partly attributed to public outrage over perceived colonial injustices. Sir Harry Oakes's story has permeated Bahamian art and literature. Plays, novels, and radio dramas have dramatized Westbourne's murdered Midas, while tours of the Westbourne site, now a private residence, draw true crime aficionados. In recent years, scholars and journalists have revisited the case with fresh eyes. Charlotte Gray's Murdered Midas, 2022, synthesizes archival research and local oral histories, portraying Oakes as a complex figure whose generosity and arrogance sowed both loyalty and enmity. Gray concludes that while de Marigny's guilt is untenable, neither is Christie's innocence beyond question, leaving the ultimate responsibility ambiguous. True crime podcasts like Bahama Whispers have interviewed descendants of Westbourne staff, uncovering stories of hush money paid by unnamed figures. These anecdotes, though unverified, suggest that at least one individual offered hush payments shortly after the trial. Advances in forensic genealogy raise hopes that preserved bedding fibers or even descendants' DNA traces might one day identify the assailant. Nearly 8 decades after his violent death, Sir Harry Oakes's murder remains officially unsolved. What began as a brutal nocturnal ambush ended in a courtroom acquittal and closed files. But it also sparked reforms, political change, and an enduring mystery that continues to captivate. Theories abound, from family betrayal to international crime syndicates, yet none satisfy all the facts. Westbourne itself stands today as a silent sentinel, its walls still whisper of whispered meetings and unspoken vendettas. For the Bahamas, the Oakes case serves as both cautionary tale and catalyst, a reminder that wealth and influence cannot shield one from violence, and that justice demands both rigor in evidence and transparency in procedure. We leave you with the unresolved question at the heart of every true crime saga: who truly killed Sir Harry Oakes? If you have insights or new leads, share them in the comments. And remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because in the shadowed corners of history, Caribbean Files will continue seeking the hidden truth.